Chapter 261, The Innermost Room. When he was out of the room, Klein carefully held his cane and lantern in the same hand, leaving his left hand free so that he could retrieve the contents of his pocket as quickly as possible in the event there was a sudden turn of events. Inside there were charms, Azac's copper whistle, some tarot cards, and apart from the remaining Rosago's characteristic, the all-black eye, his pocket contained all the means available to him. Klein and Miss Bodyguard had barely taken a step to the side when the light of the lantern illuminated the emblem on the door next to them. It was a simple drawing of a baby surrounded by the symbols of wheat, flowers, and spring water. Klein said in a solemn voice,
"The sacred emblem of Earth Mother."
As a former Nighthawk, one of his basic skills was being able to distinguish the symbols of other churches. Miss Bodyguard nodded slightly, as though to confirm this. Her black Gothic regal dress looked even eerier and terrifying in such an environment and atmosphere. Her pale face looked like a grieving wraith under the illumination of the lantern. If any other adventurer were to come here and see this scene, they would definitely flee while stumbling out of fear. Holding his breath, Klein reached out with his left hand, pushed open the stone door, and raised the lantern high. He found that the layout here was very similar to the one before, like a perfect fusion between a small prayer room and a giant statue. Across the empty wheat-colored stone tiles, Klein illuminated the 3 steps ahead of him with a lantern. On the platform was a white stone sculpture about 4 or 5 meters tall. It was a plump and beautiful lady with ears of wheat growing from her feet, and she was surrounded by spring water. Her dress seemed to flutter, and embedded in it there were different herbs and flowers as well as the depiction of different animals. The lady's chest was raised high, and in her arms was an adorable infant in swaddling clothes. She stood there, tall and sacred. "Jashege," Klein said softly with his lips curled.
"Don't tell me that this is the statue of Earth Mother?"
Miss Bodyguard didn't confirm or deny it. After checking their surroundings, the duo left the room and opened the 3rd door nearby. Behind this door was a corridor that allowed 4 people to walk alongside each other. Ahead of them, it was dark and deep, filled with mystery and oddities. It was unknown where it led to. Klein suggested,
"Let's first confirm the situation behind the 4 doors on the right."
He didn't dare to rashly enter. Using her actions as an answer, Miss Bodyguard floated backward. The duo opened the 4 stone doors on the right in succession. They separately saw the storm sacred emblem, which was made up of the symbol of gales and stormy waves, the sacred emblem of the sun, which was surrounded by lines, the sacred emblems of the god of combat, which was from the combination of the symbol for dusk and a sword-shaped symbol, as well as the sacred emblem of knowledge and wisdom, which was represented by an open book and an omniscient eye. In contrast, there were 4 suspected statues of deities in the room. A dignified middle-aged man in black armor, standing over churning waves, surrounded by stormy winds, with lightning flashing behind him and a trident in his hand. There was a young man in a pure white robe, holding a book of deeds in one hand and a golden sphere which resembled the sun in the other. He was handsome and spirited. There was a warrior sitting on a throne high above, holding a sword in front of him. His face was hidden behind his helmet's visor, his entire body covered with an indescribable sense of decay. There was a hooded elder holding a book and the omniscient eye, with only his mouth, wrinkles, and long white beard exposed. Apart from the god of steam and machinery, there were 6 humanoid statues of the Orthodox gods in this strange hall. Considering the weak position of the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery before the appearance of Roselle, there seemed to be some sort of explanation regarding this problem. Klein exclaimed with a sigh, partially because he couldn't stop it and partially because he was testing Miss Bodyguard's reaction.
"This is really strange."
This grand hall, which was 100 meters deep, actually had 6 of the Orthodox gods collected within it. This was something unimaginable in the current era. How could the Church of the 6 True Gods allow their gods to live in the same structure as the other gods? This was a custom that only existed during the Fourth Epoch? Also, what's with those humanoid statues? Although they look normal, unlike the sinister primordial demoness and the true creator statues, they still give off weird vibes. Just what had happened to make the images of the six gods evolve into abstract symbols in this day of age? No, perhaps it's been like this all this time, but the master of this place, a noble who's suspected to be a member of the Tudor family, purposely created statues of the six deities for some purpose. He thought of an item from a novel from his previous life.
The six-soul banner.
While he waited for Miss Bodyguard's reply, Klein's mind wandered. Miss Bodyguard didn't answer his query and instead said blandly,
"There's another door."
That's right.
Klein suddenly felt fear. In his opinion, doors placed in the center often had a special meaning, perhaps the core of this ancient building. Of course, this also meant that the situation was most likely the most dangerous. Klein hesitated for 2 seconds and directly asked,
What are your thoughts on that area?
Under the situation of not being able to use the gray fog to eliminate any interference, he felt that Miss Bodyguard's spiritual perception and spiritual instincts were more reliable than his divination means at present. After all, she was in a very special state, close to that of a spiritual body, allowing her to communicate with the spirit world without any obstruction to gain revelations. Miss Bodyguard closed her eyes and replied a few seconds later,
"Very dangerous. But the danger is subdued. Once you venture deeper, don't touch anything."
As Klein guessed,
Subdue danger. Is this equivalent to having something sealed inside?
he and Miss Bodyguard walked to the central stone door and stepped onto the dark floor. The light of the lantern seemed to dim a little, as though it found it difficult to drive out the darkness ahead. Klein had his left hand in his pocket, holding Isaac's copper whistle and a few charms. After about 30 steps, Miss Bodyguard suddenly stopped. Klein raised the lantern in his right hand and saw that the road ahead was blocked by boulders and dirt. On the left and right were 2 stone doors in the same shape as the ones in the main hall. The right side was ajar and filled with mud and stone. Klein mumbled,
Perhaps this ancient structure was above ground back then, but for some reason it eventually sank and collapsed. There's only one direction we can choose from.
Before he could finish his words, he saw Miss Bodyguard float ahead, stick to the huge rock, fuse into it, and disappear. Klein's mouth twitched, and he began to patiently wait. After a few minutes, Miss Bodyguard came out from the mud on the right, her body completely free of dust. Oh, she concluded flatly.
"It's completely collapsed."
For a moment, Klein was speechless and could only smile. Following that, the two of them simultaneously looked to the left where the ajar stone door was. There was a tiny crack. Klein went closer and carefully looked through the 3-centimeter gap. His spirit vision, which had originally been blocked by the stone door, immediately discovered something. There were at least 4 bright and powerful spiritual lights inside, 2 that were close to dark gold in color, and 2 that were dark blue like the sea. After using his spirit vision, a narrow scene appeared in Klein's normal vision. The firelight that entered the room illuminated the black stone tiles. On top of the tiles were piles of bones covered with rotten clothing, and a few of them emitted dark gold and dark blue light. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Klein swept his gaze to the ends of the room.
Condensed beyonder characteristics? Mystical items?
Along the dark wall stood a double door. A bloody pair of double doors! There seemed to remnants of fresh blood on the door. They continued sliding down as they reflected the light. Klein had wanted to let Miss Bodyguard scout the way ahead when he suddenly felt a change in Isaac's copper whistle that he was holding in his hand. The originally cold and mild whistle suddenly became bone-piercing. It was a profound feeling of death.
This.
Klein narrowed his eyes and instinctively took a step back. Then, he noticed that his right forearm was numb and itchy and that it was beginning to swell. A scene flashed through his mind as he immediately took out a tarot card with his left hand and slashed across his arm. What surged out from his wound wasn't blood, but tiny black squirming worms. Sizzle! When these worms fell to the ground, they eroded into smoke. They struggled and huddled, but in the end, they melted under the glow of the lanterns. After a few seconds, all the black worms in Klein's wound finally flowed out, leaving only crimson liquid. He wriggled his muscles to control the small wound and prevented the blood from flowing further. Miss Bodyguard watched this scene quietly, her pretty eyebrows creasing into a rarely seen frown. Klein was just about to speak when he discovered the coldness and deadliness of Isaac's copper whistle hadn't abated. At the same time, his gaze landed on Miss Bodyguard's shadow. She never had a shadow to begin with. Klein shouted and immediately ran towards the hall.
Run!
Miss Bodyguard quickly floated up, and the two of them saw the lantern light in front of them gradually being swallowed up by a black shadow. Tap, tap, tap! Klein ran like a hurricane as fast as he could while the light around him faded away. Tap, tap, tap! The shadow grew bigger and bigger, closer and closer, thicker and thicker. The light from the flame was about to be completely engulfed, and at that moment, the door was still a few meters away. At that moment, Klein instinctively rushed forward and then rolled across the stone door. The light from the fire suddenly brightened, and the uneasiness in his heart instantly disappeared. Isaac's copper whistle also returned to its mild and cold state. Miss Bodyguard floated beside him as she turned around and looked at the passageway, which had once again sunk into darkness. She said with an uncertain tone,
Evil spirit.
Evil spirit?
Klein almost drew a deep breath when he heard that. Fortunately, as a clown, he was good at controlling his expression and reactions. In the field of mysticism, evil spirits were extremely terrifying monsters. The best of them could even be said to be on the same level as high-sequence beyonders.
An evil spirit is wandering within this ancient structure? For some reason, it's bound or imprisoned within that room? If it was an evil spirit, that explains why Mr. Isaac's copper whistle responded. An evil spirit can be considered as an undead creature.
Klein stood up and also looked at the path, which was now submerged in darkness. He felt as if there was a pair of cold eyes staring at him. Chapter 262, Dream. In the cold and gloomy hall, Klein suddenly shivered. He retracted his gaze and said to Miss Bodyguard,
Let's return.
From the way Isaac's copper whistle reacted, it's likely that the room contains a terrifying evil spirit. Its danger level is highly likely to be above that of Marionetis Rozago and Vice Admiral Hurricane Quilangos. It's been roaming these confines for centuries to thousands of years. Perhaps it's already equivalent to a high-sequence beyonder. If it wasn't for its experiencing difficulties in letting its powers escape the room, I would already be dead. Even if Miss Bodyguard is a powerful Sequence 5, there is no hope of us turning the tides of battle with our powers combined. One needs to be aware of one's strength. I cannot be enticed by the suspected beyonder characteristics and mystical items left in there. Greed often leads to death.
Klein silently came up with a reason to convince himself. Miss Bodyguard turned her head to look at him. Without much emotion in her eyes, she asked,
What happens next?
Next?
Klein silently gritted his teeth and said with deliberation,
Let Millet Carter get the police. Who knows when this evil spirit will escape? It's best to finish it as soon as possible. No, that won't work. Mr. Carter doesn't know enough. By informing the police this way, the police department won't pay enough attention to it. The first batch of people who come to explore this place will suffer heavy casualties, and they might even indirectly help the evil spirit escape from its restraints. Also, for me to see these statues, a detective like me might be silenced. Did you see the bones and spiritual light in the room?
Miss Bodyguard once again cast her gaze towards the dark path behind the ajar stone door, and very slightly nodded her head. Klein thought quickly and said,
My guess is that these are the corpses of the explorers from before. They were killed by the evil spirit in that room, and one of the Beyonders left behind some mystical items. This might have had something to do with the Viscount family that lived beyond this premises. I plan to inquire about their last names, go to the library, and look for information about their descendants. Perhaps I might gain some valuable clues. After coming to a preliminary confirmation of the situation, I'll make a choice based on the severity of the situation. I might get some explosives, destroy the door, or send an anonymous letter to the police detailing the existence of the evil spirit. However, I'll have to think of a way to avoid the risk ahead of time. This isn't too urgent. I can take my time.
Miss Bodyguard quietly listened to what Klein had to say. Looking ahead, she said in an ethereal voice,
Are you not considering to get people to exorcise this evil spirit? Even if there were no mystical items left behind, the remains after the evil spirit dissipates are still precious enough.
It's the first time I've seen you talk so much. Probably.
Klein replied without hesitation.
The risk is too high. I think my life and health are more important.
He organized his words and added,
The most powerful person I know is you, and from your performance just now, you don't seem to be a match for that evil spirit. I can't imagine any other way of finishing it, other than calling the police.
Miss Bodyguard turned around, her pale face somewhat translucent.
You still have some sense.
She commented calmly, then drifted toward the exit of the ancient hall.
Other than being suspected to be under the true creator's influence, in what way do I look like a madman?
Klein silently lampooned. He held the lantern and cane and followed behind Miss Bodyguard. Throughout the entire process, he felt as if he was being watched by the cold eyes of the dark corridor. It was only when they walked out of the stone door that suffused an ancient aura did the feeling suddenly disappear. Klein turned around and closed the door, sealing the inverted candlestick's scuffed marks and the creepy statues of the 6 deities, allowing them to continue their 1,000-year-long slumber in that unchanging darkness and silence. Patting the dust off his clothes, he switched the lantern in his other hand and hurried back to Millet Carter's basement. As for Miss Bodyguard, she had disappeared into thin air as usual. Millet Carter was pacing about in the basement. When he saw Klein exit, he hurriedly asked,
How is it? What's the situation inside?
Klein had long thought of an excuse, as he said, with an expression of fear.
Terrible. There are a lot of snakes in there, and many spots have collapsed. I plan to gather some information, gather some manpower, and once preparations are done, do another round of exploration. During this period of time, it's best that you don't send anyone in. Believe me, there are more venomous snakes in there than you can imagine.
Millet drew a gasp and asked in fear,
Will they slither out? Do you know any experts that can deal with the snakes?
Klein immediately nodded.
I'll get people to help and try my best to deal with this matter. It's the cold autumn now, and the snakes aren't willing to move. As long as you don't send anyone to disturb them, nothing will happen.
Okay, please hurry. I'll close this door and prevent anyone from entering.
Hearing that, Millet relaxed a little. When Klein saw that his employer was truly intimidated by what he said, he quickly put down the lantern, nudged his gold-rimmed spectacles, and said,
Next up, I'll gather some information. I'll first gain a preliminary understanding of the layout of the underground structure before I explore it again. That requires you to tell me which Viscount was the original owner of this house.
Millet had bought this building precisely because it was an estate of a former noble, so he answered immediately.
Viscount Pound.
Klein asked in a professional manner.
What do you know about him and his family?
Millet pondered and said,
Not much. I only know that he won his aristocratic title in the Battle of the Violated Oath. It once enjoyed an illustrious period, but decades later, suddenly declined due to unknown reasons. The family kept losing its heirs, causing it to eventually have to seek out distant relatives to keep the aristocratic title. And the new Viscount Pound is, heh. He squandered most of the family's fortune, and he was demoted to baronet by the king. He's probably still in Backland and can go bankrupt at any moment.
Battle of the Violated Oath. The Battle of the Violated Oath that began in 738 during the Fifth Epoch.
Having successfully graduated as a history student, Klein instinctively recalled the corresponding knowledge. The war that happened about 6 centuries ago was a war involving religion. The southern Fanapotter kingdom originally believed in both Earth Mother and the god of knowledge and wisdom, but due to some influencing factors, the two churches began to be at odds with each other, and their believers often clashed. During that period, its two neighbors in the north, the Loan Kingdom and the Intis Kingdom, seized the opportunity to start a war in the name of protecting freedom of religion. In the later stages of the war, the Fasak Empire joined the fray and attempted to destroy the ploy by Loan and Intis. However, they still failed to turn the situation around. The result of the war was that the border between Loan and Fanapotter, as well as Intis and Fanapotter, countries such as Lemberg, Mason, and Sigar, gained independence. They mainly believed in the god of knowledge and wisdom, leaving the Church of Earth Mother as the only religion in the Fanapotter kingdom. The conflict that lasted 5 years was called the Battle of the Violated Oath, because both sides of the war accused their adversaries of violating the Holy Oath at the end of the Fourth Epoch. After that, there was more than 300 years of peace in the northern continent. This didn't mean that there was no conflict between nations, but rather, there were no wars on that scale again. It lasted until Roselle invented the steam engine and improved the sailboats and artillery.
This is the information recorded in the history textbooks. Thinking about it now, since it involved faith, there must have been some Beyonders from the church involved. There must have been an intense Beyonder war. However, it's said that that era was a period with few Beyonders. Squadron battles? Could the Pound family's sudden waning and continuous loss of heirs, which happened decades ago, have something to do with the discovery of the ancient structure underground?
Klein thoughtfully asked,
Do you know where Baronet Pound currently lives?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Millet shook his head slightly. Klein asked a few more questions, but seeing that he couldn't get any more information, he bade farewell and returned to 15 Minsk Street. It was almost 5 in the afternoon, and the sky was as dark as the night. Klein thought that the public libraries would have been closed by then, so he temporarily put aside the underground structure and prepared dinner for himself. He had wanted to learn to make Fanapotter noodles based on a recipe in the newspapers, but he ended up with noodles mixed in meat, sauce, and vegetables. To his surprise, it tasted pretty good. After having had his fill, Klein tossed a coin casually, divining if he should inform the police. He received a negative answer. The Backland evening was as serene as other cities, at least in Cherwood Borough. Klein was sleeping soundly, wandering through different dreams in an adrift manner when he suddenly realized, with a jolt, that he was dreaming.
Someone is invading my dreams?
Klein resisted the urge to frown and pretended to look around in confusion. He found himself in a scorching yellow desert. A roar suddenly came from the sky, and a huge monster dyed in black and gold flew over. The creature had a thick, lizard-like body and a pair of wide wings covered in a hide on its back. It descended and blotted out the sun in the sky.
A dragon! A powerful dragon.
Klein saw scales the size of a plate, a gaping mouth that emitted pure light, and 2 dark, golden vertical pupils. Roar! The dragon spat out a beam of light that seemed to envelop everything. Soon, large swaths of the desert was obliterated. Amid the light, a figure jumped into the air. He was 3 or 4 meters tall, but he didn't have the unique vertical eye of the giants. He had a handsome, young face, and he wore black, full-body armor, which seemed to be spattered with blood. This giant knight swung his broadsword upwards, and countless bluish-white flames, which appeared a little purple, condensed into long spears. They shot at the dragon. It was as if he had an entire army of illusory Beyonders helping him in battle. In the midst of the meteor shower, the giant knight leaped onto the head of the dragon, and he swung his sword down. The afterimages he had created earlier instantly overlapped, and the sword rays turned into intersecting lightning. Pow! The ground shook wildly, and the dragon fell, splattering its dark gold blood. At that moment, the scene changed to a huge bloody door. It was the same bloody door that Klein had seen in the ancient structure that very afternoon. With a creak, the bloody door opened a crack, allowing him to catch a glimpse of a black high-back chair. A man of normal height sat on the high-back chair. He had his head lowered, silent and deathly still. As his vision got closer and closer, Klein saw the man's clothes clearly. He seemed to be the knight that had just killed the dragon, and he was still wearing the black armor that was stained with blood. The only difference was that he was no longer 3 or 4 meters tall. At this moment, the man suddenly raised his head. His handsome, young face had terrifying signs of decay, his eyes ice-cold and emotionless. Klein jumped in fright and awoke from his dream. Opening his eyes, he saw the crimson moonlight shining through the curtains. Chapter 263, Spiritual Perception and Attempt. Under the dim crimson moonlight, Klein pulled back his blanket and got up. For a seer, putting weight on dreams was a basic requirement, and the dream he just had could never be dismissed as a simple nightmare. Dressed in relatively comfortable clothes, he came before the full-body mirror and said in a low voice,
I dreamed of the blood-stained door in that room.
Miss Bodyguard's figure slowly outlined itself above the mirror. She replied expressionlessly,
The influence of the evil spirit's aura. It will gradually weaken until it disappears.
Is that so?
Klein nodded slightly and returned to the side of the bed. He picked up the gold pocket watch and popped it open. Seeing that it was still early, he lay back down to sleep. This time he no longer encountered the same dream as before. Sunday morning the next day, in high spirits, Klein made himself a soft-boiled egg to go with buttered bread. In the Lowen Kingdom, or rather in the countries of the northern continent, it was a must for gentlemen to read the newspapers at breakfast, and Klein was no exception. He opened up the newspapers he subscribed to, the Tussock Times, Backlund Morning Post, and Backlund Bulletin. The Civil Servant Unified Examination Bill has been officially passed by the House of Lords. The first examination will be held in early December, and the second examination will be held at the end of January next year. The final interview will be held 2 weeks after that. Within a week, the government will announce the positions and requirements involved in this exam and begin the registration process. Reporters surmise that most of it will be held in Backlund. Klein scanned the contents, picked up his cup, and sipped his Seabay black tea. He couldn't help but think of Benson and thought to himself,
The bill is passed at the end of September. The positions will be announced in the beginning of October, and registrations will be completed by early November. The examinations will start at the beginning of December. The timing is tight and very unreasonable. That implies how much of a rush the king and the prime minister is in to have this enacted, but that's advantageous for Benson. He prepared 2 months ahead of everyone else. Even if he can't compare to the elite graduates of the universities, he would definitely be able to beat most of his competition, and the positions the elites are aiming for wouldn't clash with his. He should be fine.
Klein wanted to tap his chest 4 times to draw out a crimson moon and say, "May the goddess bless him," but then he remembered that Miss Bodyguard was nearby and resisted the urge. After all, he had claimed to be a believer of the god of steam and machinery. After finishing his last mouthful of bread, he continued reading the papers. Both houses have passed the National Atmospheric Pollution Council bill, allowing the government to set up such an organization. The coming month will be a critical period for the various parties to become a member of the council. An independent alkali industry public prosecutor has been approved with the goal of minimizing the pollution levels in acid and alkali factories. The 5th page doesn't have an advertisement for the purchase of goods from the Ernst firm. There's no need to consider participating in the Beyonder gathering tomorrow night. Tingen City, 2 Daffodil Street. Benson read and reread the news in the papers, forgetting the bread on his plate. Dressed in a long black dress, Melissa looked at her brother, who was acting oddly.
The Civil Servant Unified Examination Bill was passed?
The newspapers from the past few days had been playing up the bill that would be passed this time. Benson finally put down the newspaper, wiped his black hair, and exhaled slowly.
Yes.
At this moment, the two of them suddenly fell into silence. The room was completely silent. It even lacked the sound of knives and forks colliding with the dining plates. The indescribable atmosphere was broken by Bella, the maid who came out of the kitchen. Benson smiled and said,
This is foreseeable. Actually, the most important thing is the previous piece of news.
Melissa's expression was unusually quiet.
Oh?
Benson took a bite of his bread and smiled.
The news that the Backlund Polytechnic of Technology will be restructured into a university. It'll formally accept students next year. It won't need tests on grammar and classical literature, but will instead focus on the technical aspects. It's very suitable for graduates and students of technical schools everywhere. Melissa, I think you can try.
Melissa subconsciously retorted.
But.
Benson interrupted her with a smile.
Its tuition will be half as cheap as the Tingen, Perth, K-Boy, and Backlund and the other universities. It's equivalent to the Constant Industry University in Mid-Seashire, and there will be even more opportunities for scholarships. Melissa, don't you like machinery, steam, and this stuff? This is the best opportunity for you to have access to much advanced and deeper knowledge. Give it a try, how about it? Don't worry about wasting money. Although that money can allow us to maintain our present lives without working, we're still young. We must not define our lives like this. As you can see, compared to a few months ago, my grammar has improved a lot. It might be better if we change environments. I know you can't bear to part with Tingen in this place. Well, we'll come back eventually, but not when we're young.
Melissa looked at the various components on the coffee table as her lips moved a few times, and she said,
What about Bella?
After Klein's death, she didn't want to hire any more maidservants, but when she thought of how tragic Bella's life would be after she lost her job, she gave up on the idea. After all, the extra expense of 5 soldi a week was already nothing to the Moretti family, which had an annuity of at least £300. To this, Benson shook his head and laughed.
There are still a few more months before that happens. We can let Bella find a new job ahead of time. Before that, we will continue to pay her and provide her with a bedroom. Furthermore, her cooking skills are much better than before, so she can apply to be a chef at someone's home. It's a pity. Of course, everything depends on the premise that you can pass the entrance exams at Backlund's University of Technology.
He had wanted to say that it was a pity that Bella didn't have much time to learn how to cook, but after looking at Melissa's gloomy expression, he forcefully changed the topic. Before Melissa could say anything, Benson smiled and touched his hair.
I'm planning on resigning tomorrow and will focus on preparing for the exam. Most of the positions are said to be in Backlund. That's my goal. I hope we can go there together.
Melissa was silent for a moment before she slowly nodded her head. At the same time, she put down her fork and knife, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and said,
I'm going to the bathroom.
Benson watched his sister leave the dining table, and the smile that had been plastered over his face rapidly vanished.
All right.
He took out the silver pocket watch with the vine leaf patterns, took a close look at it, and sighed very quietly. During the whole of Sunday, Klein busied himself with the public libraries in the Sherwood Borough in search of information related to Viscount Pound, but the Viscount's family didn't have a single biography, nor did it arouse the interest of any historian to conduct a special study. They were scattered across the annals of history, and Klein, who had no search function to use, felt a throbbing pain in his head as he faced the vast collection of books and essays. He spent 6 hours browsing through a lot of information, but failed to find any useful information.
I have to find someone who has a deep knowledge of the history of the nobility, or I have to bribe someone in the police department to get the address of Baronet Pound. He's an aristocrat, and the police department must have a corresponding record, and there aren't many aristocrats.
When Klein got home, he stood in front of the mirror and talked to the air. The surface of the mirror quickly outlined Miss Bodyguard's Gothic regal dress and the black bonnet on her head. She nodded slightly, as if agreeing with Klein. She then suddenly spoke out in a dreamy voice.
The employment period is over.
I know, the 3 days are up.
Klein thought for a moment and asked,
If I can obtain some clues about the Pound family, would you like to know?
Miss Bodyguard didn't answer, but gave a slight nod. Try.
Through Merrick?
After nodding her head again, Miss Bodyguard bent down, lifted up her skirt, and bowed. Her figure quickly disappeared, and the reflection in the mirror was no longer anything special. Klein looked around and didn't relax as a result of that. He proceeded systematically to prepare dinner and fill his stomach. He waited until it was late in the night before returning to his bedroom and drew back the curtains. Then, he took out the iron cigar case and reached out to touch Rosago's all-black eye. A series of illusory roars immediately rampaged through his mind, seeming to tear apart his mind and destroy his thoughts. With great difficulty, Klein resisted the pain which was making his head explode. Once again, he saw the black threads spreading out from different parts of his body. They were densely packed and illusory, reaching out endlessly. He quickly released his grip to escape from the negative influence. After nearly a minute, everything returned to normal.
Phew, I can finally go up to the gray fog and verify the spiritual perception I had before.
Klein silently said to himself as he quickly set up the ritual, summoned himself, and responded to himself. Then, in his spirit form, he carried Azek's copper whistle, picked up the iron cigar case, and returned above the gray fog. Klein sat at seat of honor at the ancient long table, using his fingers to create spiritual flames and burning the blood-stained documents in the corner and any other items that were no longer needed. When he was done, he opened the iron cigar case and was surprised to find that the all-black eye had become silent, no longer showing any signs of madness, but that corruptive influence was still settling within. It just wasn't active, as if it was in hibernation. Phew, Klein muttered.
As expected, it's impossible to separate them directly.
Following that, on the other side of the ancient table, a man in a hooded robe appeared. Just like his previous attempt to create a clone, this man was stiff and lifeless. It was obvious that he wasn't someone real at a glance. There was no way he could deceive the members of the Tarot Club. However, Klein already had an idea regarding this. He extended his hand and held the all-black eye. There was silence in his ears, and there were no longer any terrifying howls. Using the amassed beyonder characteristic, he could see that there were also black threads floating out from the fake body opposite him. Soon after, Klein carefully let his spirituality spread out through the all-black eye, touching a few of the illusory threads. All of a sudden, he felt like he was holding on to something. With a thought from him, the fake person raised his hand.
It worked! I can use the ability of the marionettist to create a fake Tarot Club member. However, this is draining on me. I'm unable to maintain a second one. The symbol on the back of the chair won't change accordingly, but it's not like Miss Justice and the rest can see it.
Klein happily practiced, over and over again, even learning how to manipulate his clone's throat and mouth to let him speak. When his spirituality was almost exhausted, he smiled and said to the fake person in front of him,
Welcome, new member. Which tarot card do you wish to draw?
After saying that, he closed his mouth. The fake person opposite him lifted his hand to stroke his chin as he laughed hoarsely.
World. I choose the card, the World.
Chapter 264, A 5-Person Gathering. If the Fool signified the beginning of the Tarot Club, then the World signified the end, a perfect ending of a cycle and sublimation. Klein had named his Smurf the World because he hoped that it would lead to a beautiful beginning and end.
In the future, I'll be able to make the world make requests or do things that wouldn't be convenient for me. This will greatly reduce the possibility that my image as Mr. Fool will collapse. With an alt, no. A Smurf truly is what makes life complete.
Klein sighed in relief and waved the world away. Following that, he spread out his spirituality, wrapped himself, and stimulated a descent into the gray fog and returned to the real world. He had left Rosago's all-black eye above the gray fog. After all, he couldn't usually use the item anyway, and he had to constantly worry about having it discovered by others or losing it. After putting away the summoning ritual materials, Klein looked up towards the crimson moonlight that passed through the curtains, filled with anticipation for tomorrow's gathering. When it came to understanding the aristocracy, he believed that Miss Justice would definitely surpass 99% of the people of Lowen. And with his Smurf the World, he could directly ask her about the Pound family without worrying about affecting his image as the Fool. Of course, this had to be done in a more tactful manner. After all, Detective Sherlock Moriarty was also looking for information on the Pound family, and only with enough information would he be able to perform a divination above the gray fog.
Phew.
Klein thought hard for a while before he relaxed and fell asleep. After entering the gray fog, it was as though the remnants of the evil spirit's aura had completely disappeared. Klein slept until dawn, but he didn't see the sun because of the thin fog outside. He continued as planned, heading to the rest of the public libraries in Backland, but he no longer queried the librarians, nor did he mention the Pound family. He only leafed through the materials concerning the nobility by himself. At 20 minutes to 3 in the afternoon, Klein entered the mysterious space above the gray fog ahead of time. Inside the vast and ancient palace, he sat down at the seat belonging to the Fool. He conjured the fake world on the opposite side of the mottled bronze table as he familiarized himself with operating the world. After a few minutes, Klein took out his pocket watch and glanced at it, sending a message to the crimson star that symbolized the sun to prepare for the gathering. While he waited, he played with the all-black eye and fitted it with a silver chain. Then, he wound it around his right wrist and covered it with his sleeve. At 3 in the afternoon, rays of light shot out from the palace that resembled a giant's residence. Justice, the Hanged Man, and the sun each projected a blurry silhouette dyed in crimson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Good afternoon.
Audrey was about to greet every member of the Tarot Club when her gaze suddenly fell upon the figure seated at the very end. It was a stranger, wearing a hooded black robe. He was also illusory and hazy.
This is?
Audrey looked at Mr. Fool with both puzzlement and delight.
Has the Tarot Club grown bigger again? Is it Fours or Zio? No, the height doesn't match. Is it someone else?
While Audrey was deep in thought, Klein leisurely leaned back and said,
This is a new member, Mr. World.
At the same time, through his gray, fog-augmented spirit vision, he discovered that the surface color of the sun's astral projection had become a little purer, but it had yet to reach the standards of Sequence 8. His initial judgment was that the sun had completely digested the Bard potion.
Hello.
Audrey greeted politely, curiously scrutinizing the new member. She quickly read some of the corresponding details through the hazy fog.
Mr. World is a person who is reserved. He seldom moves and always wears a straight face. I wonder where he's from. Lowen? Intis? Or a place as mysterious as the City of Silver?
Audrey nodded thoughtfully. After so many gatherings, she had deduced one thing from the fact that the sun couldn't engage in their conversations. That was, that he was most likely not speaking the Lowen language, and that the information that he heard was most likely translated by Mr. Fool. After the Hanged Man, Alger, and the sun, Derek, greeted the world respectively, to which the newcomer gave a rather cold response, Klein looked at Justice and said,
The 2 candidates you have nominated are still under examination. I'll give you a simple task. You can entrust it to them in your name. This is part of the examination.
It should be this strict. Not only was Audrey not disappointed, she even felt that it was only necessary. The members of the Tarot Club must be strictly selected. Not just anyone can become one. And for me to be pulled in by Mr. Fool at the very beginning shows that I was lucky, and luck is a unique quality as well.
She thought proudly, before adding in a somewhat guilty tone,
All right, please issue the mission.
Audrey gave an affirmative answer. Klein stretched out his right hand and placed it on the table, showing a picture of Lenavis and his dressing.
Investigate the man in the painting. He's in Backland.
Klein had the portrait appear in front of Miss Justice. Audrey looked over and saw a young man with neatly combed black hair and round glasses. He had a full forehead. It was a colored oil painting with taunting brown eyes that seemed abnormally protruded, and at the bottom were the words formerly known alias, Lenavis, and other information.
It's a simple mission, which means that the target isn't strong. However, there must be something special about him that makes Mr. Fool aware of his existence. Although it's a simple mission, there might be a deeper purpose behind it. For someone as powerful as him, it shouldn't just be a test.
Audrey momentarily allowed her to throng her mind. Only after a few seconds did she say,
I'll entrust it to them.
The two ladies seemed to have many connections in Backlund, which would serve to help in finding Lenivus. After confirming the matters pertaining to his revenge, Klein fell silent, and he deliberately allowed his smurf to take center stage. The world surveyed the area and spoke with a hoarse voice.
Mr. Fool told me that I can issue missions and gather ingredients here. Is that so?
Audrey elegantly nodded and said,
Yes. However, you need to wait patiently. What's going to happen next is Mr. Fool's reading time. I completed my mission to assassinate Intis Ambassador Bakerland, but I didn't even mention it to occupy this period of time.
She thought, raising her chin slightly.
Miss Justice, you really have a great sense of mastership. I'll have to pay the price of knowledge later so that the assassination of Bakerland can truly come to an end.
Klein looked away, amused, and looked over at the hanged man. Alger Wilson didn't speak blindly because of the appearance of a new member. He remained silent and observed in secret. At this moment, when he saw Mr. Fool looking at him, he quickly and humbly bowed and said,
This time, there are still 6 pages. The final page will be given to you next time.
Klein nodded.
Sure.
The hanged man quickly focused his mind, recalled the contents, and expressed them with his mind. He quickly finished writing 6 pages of the diary and saw them suddenly vanish and appear in Klein's hands. Klein looked down and swept through the contents of the first page. 9th February. I have a 3rd child. I named him Bornova. My eldest daughter, Bernadette, was lucky. Her mother and I were just low-sequence beyonders back then. She is free to choose the path she wants to take. My eldest son, CL, is the most unfortunate. He inherited a minute amount of beyonder characteristics, but he has to follow my path. Perhaps he could make changes at sequence 4, but attaining high sequences are never easy. My second son, Bornova, is in a better situation than CL, but still worse than his sister. I have his characteristics equivalent to a sequence 5 beyonder. This has reduced the burden on me, allowing me to digest my potion even faster, accelerating my advancement. And when he was just born, he was already showing various traits of an astromancer. Zaratul came to congratulate me in secret and praised Bornova as a lovely angel. I asked this master of divination what he would accomplish in the future. He only smiled and didn't answer me. When I asked him about CL's future, he finally said that death is an inevitable ending, but that might be a good thing. Seriously, a seer's words are always so vague that it makes one want to pry their mouths open. When I finally asked about Bernadette's future, he suddenly became very serious. He said she would hate me, detest me, turn her back on me, and she would become an important figure in the mysterious world. Sometimes, you really shouldn't ask about the result of a divination. I find it hard to believe that my adorable and kind Bernadette, who cares for her brother, adores her father, and pampers her mother, would hate me and betray me. Why would that happen? What excessive act did I do? Maybe she'll have someone she loves but I'm not satisfied with. Some punk that I'll end up killing? No, Zaratul isn't a soothsayer, and the divination he receives might be wrong. Forget it, Roselle.
I think I smell the scent of some contrived family melodrama.
After reading the first page of the diary, Klein couldn't help but lampoon silently. At the same time, he naturally recalled what Zaratul had told him about the future of Bernadette, an important figure in the mysterious world.
Was this referring to the world of the Beyonders? What level would someone be deemed an important figure?
Klein turned the pages thoughtfully. 22nd May. Florin of the Sauron family actually wants me to be his subordinate. Do I look like someone who would be a lackey? His attitude is simply unacceptable. I swear that I'll one day make him pay the price for his arrogance today. However, some of the things he mentioned are very interesting and worth pondering over. Chapter 265, Cards of Blasphemy.
Florin said that the history of the Sauron family exceeds 2,000 years, making it longer than even the Church of the God of Craftsmanship's history. They witnessed all the cooperation and strife, light and darkness in the fourth epoch, and they have survived until this very day. Other than the Augustus family of Lowen, the Einhorn family of Faysac, and the Castilla family of Fanapotter, the other powerful families that have been deemed their equal, such as the Antigonus family and the Zaratul family, have been relegated as vestiges of history, or have turned to nothing but rats in the sewers, hiding from the public as shady existences. He said that making me his subordinate, a subordinate of the ancient and glorious Sauron family, is a gift to me. Back then, I wanted to fuck all 8 generations of his ancestors. However, for the Sauron family to have a history exceeding 2,000 years is indeed surprising. The fourth epoch is known as the Epoch of the Gods. Be it the 7 orthodox deities of the present times, or Death, Primordial Demoness, Dark Side of the Universe, and the True Creator, they all remained active in the real world. Legend had it that they frequently did miracles. For the Sauron family to last to this day and enjoy its current high standing, it's definitely not an easy matter. Their long history has given them far more than just arrogance. They must be hiding many secrets, and perhaps even extremely terrifying sealed artifacts. They are truly a colossus that stands tall above the earth, one that people can't look straight at.
Upon reading this, Klein had a lot of ideas.
For Roselle to be able to overthrow the rule of the Sauron family, he must have experienced a horrifying and heart-stirring struggle. Even if the Sauron family didn't have a Grade 0 sealed artifacts, they definitely had no lack of Grade 1 sealed artifacts. Adding to the possibility of having high-sequence Beyonders, even if the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery fully supported Roselle, it's unlikely that any good outcome might come out of it. Could it be that before all of that happened, the Sauron family was already beginning to wane and weaken, and the Intis Revolution was just an external manifestation of this state? What did they experience during that period of time? Did they lose sealed artifacts? Did the high-sequence Beyonders die? Did that attract the attention of many ambitious people? Judging from this diary, the Augustus family of Lowen is no stranger to the Antigonus and Zaratul families. Internally, they should have corresponding records. The Sun had previously mentioned that the City of Silver has endured for more than 2,500 years in the Dark Ages. According to my initial judgment, that's the date of the Cataclysm. In the past 200 years, the Sauron family claimed to have a history spanning more than 2,000 years. I wonder if it will extend to the point before the City of Silver. I'll try to find an opportunity to mention the Sauron clan and see the Sun's reaction. If the Sun still has a look of stupefaction, it would indirectly mean that the Sauron family only rose up after the Cataclysm. Perhaps they had benefited greatly from the Cataclysm to become nobles in the 4th epoch and royalty in the 5th epoch. Well, even if the Sun doesn't know, it doesn't prove it completely. Perhaps he didn't learn his history well.
When Klein turned to the 3rd page, he found that the content should have been written in the early days of Roselle's appointment as Consul of the Intis Republic. From the diary entries on this page, it can be seen that Roselle had developed and promulgated a new civil code, which encouraged inventions, protected trade, and the incubation of the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't him merely satisfying his own warped humor of acting as this world's Napoleon and his ambition to change the world. What he did allowed him to reconcile with the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. The Eternal Blazing Sun was also the god of deeds, the guardian of businesses. The closer to the times the civil code was and the more prosperous trade was, made it more in line with the needs of the church. Judging from this part of the diary, the relationship between Roselle and the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun was gradually thawing and beginning to improve. When he brazenly claimed the title of emperor more than 10 years later and called himself Caesar, it's likely that he obtained the simultaneous endorsement of the two churches. Otherwise, it would have been too risky. Then, what resulted in his assassination? Klein cast his gaze at the 4th page in puzzlement.
11th August. That retard Florin is showing off again. He said that he's the most promising member of the Sauron family generation to become a high-sequence Beyonder, because he's very similar to his great-great-grandfather. Is there any necessary connection? I looked him up and down, left and right, but I couldn't find any sign of talent. Moreover, in the field of Beyonders, is talent important? Well, figuring out the essence to acting can be a core element of talent, but that's not necessary. As long as one knows the acting method and not be stupid enough to misunderstand the meaning or avoid doing things that easily result in a loss of control, then one has a chance to completely digest the potions. Which is to say, just a bit more time and effort needs to be spent. In one's lifetime, it's not impossible to become a high-sequence beyonder. The main obstacle to becoming a high-sequence beyonder is the difficulty of obtaining beyonder ingredients and the difficulty of corresponding rituals. Of course, I have to admit that those born as beyonders have more time to prepare. Was Florin's great-great-grandfather a high-sequence beyonder? Does looking like him imply talent?
It can be seen that at the time of writing this diary entry, Roselle was still very young, and that he wasn't aware of the two laws of beyonder characteristics, indestructibility and conservation. Klein nodded indiscernibly. With his current knowledge, he could probably understand the hidden meaning behind Florence Sauron's words. A high-sequence beyonder's beyonder characteristic remains contained a spirit mark. This was also one of the reasons why it was easy for people to lose control when concocting potions with this ingredient. And people who resembled the original owner could avoid this negative influence to the greatest extent. Their chances of success were higher than the average person, so they were considered gifted. How holy artifacts recognized their masters probably shared the same conditions. This achieves the same goal via different approaches as the acting method, but it can't be popularized. Once the advancement is successful, one would still have to do the acting method required of the potion to completely digest its characteristics. While in deep thought, Klein glanced at the two diary entries at the back of the page and discovered how much Emperor Roselle enjoyed the liberalness in Intis. But he was worried that his future wife would be equally liberal. With the paper making some noise, Klein placed the 5th page at the top.
20th April. I participated in that ancient organization's secret gathering once again. Those members still leave me shaking. It's hard to believe that they're actually all members of this organization. This time, I learned some of the ancient organization's philosophy. They believe that people will always lose some of their individuality bit by bit until they sleep. Hence, by trying hard to observe and remember oneself, one can use the various types of information to achieve the purification needed to face the final end of days. They've kept and passed down secrets for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. They believe that dusk is inevitable and that doomsday cannot be avoided. They believe in the original creator and believe that he is not truly dead. When dusk comes and everything ends, he will wake up from his slumber and let everything return to him. He will create a new world, a new history. All of the actions from this organization stem from this belief. It can be said that they show great animosity to the true creator. They aren't stingy with their descriptions to describe him as fallen and evil. They wield the second blasphemy slate and the 22 paths of the divine, but they only allow members to choose a few of them, with the exception of those who were already beyonders when they joined. Are there any secrets to these pathways? I'll first jot it down and analyze it in the future. These pathways are Bard, Sailor, Reader, and Spectator. Haha, I have to change my habits of calling these sequence pathways in the future. Using those names in that ancient organization makes me appear quite uneducated.
This is very similar to what I've analyzed from my hostile relations and from Mr. A's request, with it being very similar to how the Bard, Sailor, Reader, and Secret Supplicant pathways can be exchanged as Sequence 4. Is Manipulator a high sequence of the Spectator pathway? Why do many secret organizations declare that the apocalypse would definitely befall us one day? For example, the Demonist sect, this ancient organization, and they themselves do not rely on this to proselytize. Is it a requirement for brainwashing, or would there really be a so-called dusk?
Klein thought of many things, but due to a lack of information, he was unable to come to a definite answer. At the same time, he couldn't help but silently lampoon.
Roselle, can't you just write down the name of that organization?
Resisting the changes in his expression and body movements, Klein turned to the last page, which had relatively little content, and read.
1st Jan, a beginning of a new year. I happen to finish my first card of Blasphemy. I will hide the ultimate secret of the 22 paths of the divine in these different cards of Blasphemy and scatter them across the world. If things fail, they'll be the best insurance that my children can fall back onto. Haha, I'll disrupt the order they wish to have and spread the profound mysteries of the divine. These cards of Blasphemy will possess characteristics of being anti-divination and anti-prophecy. Apart from the ones I'm giving my children, the fated ones will receive it. I'm a person who makes sure to square accounts when it comes to grudges, and after I die, who cares if floods deluge the heavens? Oh, I didn't create that sentence. In short, the more chaotic the world is, the better it is. I have to consider how to name the cards of Blasphemy that will form a set. The Paths of the Divine, number 22. The major arcana tarot cards also have 22 cards. They can match quite well, but there are a few that don't meet the requirements. I need to make some changes to match the original potion names. That ancient organization is my last and biggest insurance. I don't know if they'll support me, or the manner in which they'll support me in. I still remember the shock when I first saw the Blasphemy slate. So it turns out that the Beyonder pathways are paths of the divine. It really is true that the Blasphemy slate is blaspheming the deities. Above every pathway's sequence 1, there is still a sequence 0. And there's a corresponding potion and ritual. Each pathway can only have one sequence 0. And sequence 0 is the sequence of a true God. For example, sequence 0, Sun,